Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I'd like to thank this YouTube audience for taking the time to hear my conspiracy. Story time. One time, back when I was in junior high, my cousin slept over my house. Our choice movies of the night were Atlantis, the Lost Empire, and The Road to Eldorado. Unintentionally, we ended up having a mini Discovery of a Lost Civilization marathon. Now, some of you may think, that's all these two movies have in common, right? Aside from the Lost Cities, they are two drastically different films. Well, that is where you'd be wrong. You can only imagine my surprise when I recently found out that they are much more related than I first realized. How so? Well, I'm Arielle with ChannelFrederator, and I'm here to tell you that Atlantis the Lost Empire was originally supposed to be what we know today as The Road to Eldorado. Pause for effect. And roll that title card! Here's what I have to show you. Tumblr user KittensInSocks24 made a post in mid-February stating that she had made a terrible discovery when she stumbled upon a Variety article dating back to March 1993. It's so outdated that it calls Pixar by its old name, High Tech Toons. It was about Disney's plans on making Toy Story. At the end of the article, it listed the rest of the upcoming movies Disney had in production at the time. Nightmare Before Christmas, Pocahontas, Lion King. Oh, that sounds about right. Oh, and one more. Atlantis. Wait, what? That wasn't released until 2001. What's that doing there? And also, the article described Atlantis as a musical retelling of The Man Who Would Be King. First of all, Atlantis was not a musical. In fact, I hear that the crew wore shirts that read fewer songs, more explosions. No, really, that's a fact. But more importantly, what is The Man Who Would Be King? Well, it is a book by Rudyard Kipling, the same guy who wrote The Jungle Book. To summarize briefly, it was about these two scruffy, troublemaking, adventurous guys who decide to run off to the region of Kafiristan to become kings. Just because. They succeed, they become the new rulers, and the natives end up believing that one of them is a god. This makes things difficult when obviously it's hard to pretend you're immortal when you're not. They're found out when the one believed to be a god, Dravat, gets bitten. The bite draws blood and it gives them away because, as you might have heard, gods don't bleed. Sound familiar? The Road to Eldorado. That is exactly what you were thinking of. Eldorado is loosely based on The Man Who Would Be King. And this ancient article is telling us that Atlantis was originally based on the same story. Funny how that goes. So what happened? Well, I have a bigger story to tell you, and let me tell you, explorers, it is a treasure trove of drama. I've got the map. Allow me to lead you on a journey through animation history. It's actually a certificate to be part of Jack Sparrow's crew. Do you all remember that time back in the late 90s to the mid 2000s where Disney and DreamWorks were putting out movies around the same time that were weirdly similar to each other, at least in subject matter? There were the Bug movies, A Bug's Life and Ants, the Zoo movies, Madagascar and the Wild, Fish movies, Finding Nemo and Shark Tale, and the Rat movies, Flushed Away and Ratatouille. This competition is known in the film world as dueling. It is simply the event when one company finds out what another company is working on, and they decide to make something similar to compete with it. See who does it better. So that must be the case, right? This is just a common thing, and Atlantis and Eldorado were just the result of an ancient civilization-themed duel? Well, not exactly. See, when it comes to that particular duel, The Road to Eldorado is usually pitted up against The Emperor's New Groove. Both films are based in ancient Latin America, and they both came out in the year 2000, while Atlantis came out a year later. And people are right to compare them. They were absolutely in competition with each other. It's confirmed in a book, The Men Who Would Be King, an almost epic tale of moguls, movies, and a company called DreamWorks. An incredibly coincidental title, by the way. The book covers the drama behind DreamWorks. The book says, from Disney's perspective, Katzenberg was once again swiping at an idea. Roger Allers and Matthew Jacobs had been developing The Emperor's New Groove, originally called Kingdom of the Sun, at Disney long before DreamWorks was formed. While Katzenberg was aware of the film while he was at Disney is hard to prove, Disney smelled a conspiracy. End quote. They were in a race with Disney. They wanted Eldorado to be released first. You see, when you're dueling, it all comes down to who's got the quickest draw. If your movie is released second, everyone will just assume you were ripping off the first. Here's another quote from the book. Katzenberg made his wishes clear. With that, I want to segue into telling you about the real-life Disney villain that is the idea-swiping Jeffrey Katzenberg. I don't mean that as an insult. Disney villains are great. Jeffrey Katzenberg is a force to be reckoned with. He was the head of Walt Disney Studios from the late 80s to early 90s. He's pretty much the dude responsible for the Disney Renaissance and Disney's relationship with Pixar. Yeah. His story is that he wanted to become the president of the Walt Disney Company, second in command to Michael Eisner, the chairman and CEO at the time. But that president job belonged to a man named Frank Wells. Katzenberg said he deserved the job, but Eisner said that it would hurt Wells to just go and replace him like that. But he was quoted saying, "If for any reason Frank was not here, you are the number 2 person, and I want you to have the job." To put it bluntly, if Wells wasn't there, he would have the job. Apparently later he called that conversation a misunderstanding. Then Frank Wells died in a tragic helicopter crash. Just goes to show you gotta watch what you say, right? It was a sad but opportune moment for Katzenberg. Except he didn't get the job. Eisner decided to take over the president duties for himself. Not only that, Roy E. Disney, Walt Disney's own nephew, did not like Katzenberg because of his ego. So instead of getting promoted, he was asked to resign in 1994. And what came of that was his own company with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen. DreamWorks, SKG. And he stormed back into Hollywood with a vengeance. And what was that plan for vengeance, you ask? Well, it was the dueling I explained earlier. And it all started with DreamWorks' first animated movie, Ants. You see, Jeffrey Katzenberg stayed friends with Pixar's main man, John Lasseter, for a little while after he left Disney. In October 1995, the two were catching up, and Lasseter began to excitedly explain the plot to his next project, Bugs. He trusted Katzenberg with that information. And then in 1996, Katzenberg started production on Ants, a movie strikingly similar to the plot of A Bug's Life. He denies it and says that the movie was pitched to him years prior, but yeah, okay, man, whatever. But did it really begin with Ants, though? Again, production on Ants began in 1996. You know what was in production before that? The Road to Eldorado in 1995. To recap for you guys, there's a lot of dates being thrown around here. Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney in 1994, and that article was from 1993. So the man who used to run Disney Animation had to know that the musical retelling of The Man Who Would Be King was in production at least a year before he was gone, right? Therefore, perhaps we never knew that his first move against Disney was not to take down A Bug's Life, but to completely halt production on Atlantis, to inconvenience the Disney company, to force them to send the movie in a completely different direction. Imagine if it went as planned and Miguel and Tulio found Atlantis instead. That glowy mechanical jaguar boss fight would still fit in perfectly, and Tulio would still get the girl in the bikini. Who needs Cheldorado when you've got Cade Atlantis? Though there is something else. All behind-the-scenes information on Atlantis: The Lost Empire says that production started on the movie in 1996. To be exact, they began by throwing ideas around at a lunch date after The Hunchback of Notre Dame wrapped. Producer Don Hahn, directors and writers Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise, and writer Tab Murphy all got together in a Mexican restaurant in Burbank and asked themselves, what do we do next? Not a musical. Hey, how about doing an action-adventure movie about Atlantis and have it based on Journey to the Center of the Earth? Okay, hold on, what? After all we talked about? We know this isn't true from the article, unless maybe the article was some kind of mistake. Alright, where's the source? Where else can we find information on this? Come on, this is some sweet gossip. I want to know if it's legit. Okay, it was a deep dive into the internet, but I got something. That 1993 article was about Toy Story, remember? Fun fact, Joss Whedon was a writer for Toy Story. Here we have a book titled Joss Whedon Conversations. I found on page 91 he was asked what he was working on before he got the call to work on Toy Story. And he says, quote, "They, meaning Disney, wanted to do the Journey to the Center of the Earth meets The Man Who Would Be King, which eventually became Atlantis." Aha! So that article left out a little detail, didn't it? Back in 1993, Atlantis wasn't only going to be based on The Man Who Would Be King, it was also going to take from the Journey to the Center of the Earth, which, if you remember, is the same story that the directors decided on recreating over their burrito lunch in 1996. This was even confirmed in a second source, the book Joss Whedon, a creative portrait from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Marvel's The Avengers. It even points out in this book that Whedon was credited as a writer for Atlantis because he was the first guy assigned to it, though he contributed not a shred to the movie. So perhaps this 1996 lunch meeting that kicked off the production for Atlantis: The Lost Empire was just the group deciding to drop their idea to make a musical romp of The Man Who Would Be King and head in a totally different direction, since DreamWorks was already on its way with that, and in the end they just decided to keep the Journey to the Center of the Earth part of the idea with a sprinkle of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? I mean, obviously nobody's going to say in an interview, we consider 1996 the start of our production because that's when we decided to go the journey route for Atlantis, because, freaking DreamWorks ran off with our idea. You, Katzenberg. We don't know who pitched it originally. This was a tricky conspiracy to research since this little tidbit of information is so obscure. For all we know, Katzenberg pitched it. Maybe he wanted to recreate the man who would be king. Maybe he took custody of half the idea when he divorced Disney. Or maybe it was so early in production that nobody actually cared at that point. Who knows? One thing's kind of weird though. As far as my research went, I could not find a single quote or clip from Eldorado behind the scenes footage where somebody claimed that their story was based on the man who would be king. Afraid somebody might call you out, DreamWorks? I'm like 25 years too late, but looks like I did. Don't mess with me and Kittens in Socks 24. In all fairness, while DreamWorks is easy to point fingers at with its colorful reputation, this is not a confirmed theory. There's lots to back it up, but not enough information specifically telling us about that time frame where the original plans for Atlantis were in the works. We don't know what Jeffrey Katzenberg was doing or what his involvement was. We don't even know how far along they were on Atlantis. It's just a theory. Wrong show. On this show, we give ratings. So for this treasure, we're going to give it 4 ancient artifacts out of 5. We have not yet discovered the ancient civilization of information that will grant us the final piece to the puzzle. Until then, explorers, the history remains a mystery. Wow, there was loads of information in this one. Maybe you learned something. I sure did. That Katzenberg, am I right? Please don't hurt me, sir, if you ever see this. I liked Eldorado better. Hey, there's an idea. Everyone let us know in the comments which movie you liked better, The Road to Eldorado or Atlantis the Lost Empire. While you're down there, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and also click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. We post conspiracies every Thursday. Might I also recommend you support our Patreon, where if you join, you'll get sneak peeks of new pilots, behind the scenes footage, and a bunch of other extra stuff related to our videos. Also, again, my name is Arielle, also known as R2 Ninja Turtle on the rest of the internet. You can find me on DeviantArt, Instagram, Twitch, and all other social media under that username. And with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and remember, Frederator loves you.